So this is where we start looking for the other remained spider people.
Correct. You must find the Spider-Man of this dimension before it is too late. I believe that our enemy has already begun looking for him. You must act now. Best of luck, my spider totems.
Well, okay. Where do you think we should start looking? Oh, look! There he is!
What in the world? Who the heck are you guys? Wait, is that a pig?
You got a problem with pigs?
Oh my god, is that a giant spider robot? That looks really cool.
That's what I thought.
Hello, what is up YouTube, Josh here speaking. Today we are going to be talking about how my opinion on Tom Holland's Spider-Man changed after watching Spider-Man No Way Home, which is, by the way, one of the biggest superhero movies as of today. Originally, I actually told myself that I wouldn't be doing a Spider-Man No Way Home video because the hype would have been gone by now. Also because the movie was delayed over here in the Philippines, which was very disappointing because actually I got spoiled before I got to experience it, and that was unavoidable at this point. It was just frustrating. As a Spider-Man fan, that really sucks, you know? Anyways, despite that amazing turn of events, I still enjoyed the movie, just like everybody else. I do think that it is absolutely one of the best Spider-Man movies we've ever had, next to Spider-Man 2 and Into the Spider-Verse. So of course, I just couldn't stay quiet. It bothered me for days. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept getting distracted like no joke. So I just said, alright, whatever, let's make a video about it real quick. So instead of making a full review of the movie, in which I'm pretty sure a lot of channels have already done by now, I'm going to be talking about how this movie changed my point of view for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Because if you didn't know, I was actually not the biggest fan of Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man. I mean, I didn't hate his version. I think that's something that most people tend to misunderstand. Just because someone doesn't like something doesn't mean they hate it. It's all just a matter of preferences. I totally agree that Tom Holland is doing a fantastic job playing his character. I did enjoy watching his first two movies. I think they were fun to watch, especially Far From Home. It just always felt like something was missing with his movies, and I think it's because this Spider-Man is more of a reimagined version of Spider-Man instead of an adaptation. Let's not ignore the fact that there are a lot of things that had been changed with his Peter Parker. Like, all the people around him are different. Aunt May is younger, Flash Thompson is still a bully but is a completely different character. Instead of Mary Jane, we got Michelle Jones. Instead of Harry Osborn, we get Ned Leeds, which is actually the best friend of Miles Morales, Genki, in the comics and video game. Now, I don't necessarily hate the things that they changed with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Some of the things they did change kinda make sense, like Aunt May being younger. I'm actually okay with that. I think Ned Leeds was a really good character. Seeing Spider-Man have a best friend who he can talk about Spider-Man stuff is something we've never seen before, and it is really fun to watch. But you know, like I said, iconic characters from the Spider-Man stories are just missing, you know? Where is Harry Osborn? Where is Oscorp? Just how can these important things not exist in a Spider-Man story, you know? But yeah, that's just my personal preferences. Maybe others are not bothered by all these changes, but it does a little bit for me, you know? On the bright side though, this Peter Parker has the advantage of being able to interact with other Marvel characters like the Avengers, Nick Fury, and Daredevil. Tobey and Andrew don't have that because their movies are 100% made by Sony. Tom Holland is also better in terms of looks and personality. I think we can all agree that Tom Holland nails the character as Peter Parker because he does look like a teenager, and I like the way that he freaks out and talks to other characters, like he's clumsy and stuff, which is something that you'd normally do if you're being surrounded by big superheroes like Iron Man and Captain America. But outside of all that, everything else is just different. And surprisingly, No Way Home changed all that in the best way they could have done it, by giving us some familiar faces starting with J. Jonah Jameson. Not only does J.K. Simmons make the perfect JJ, but it's also because he played this character before in the Sam Raimi trilogy that it just made us feel nostalgic while watching a new movie. Hearing him talk trash about Spider-Man on that giant screen after Aunt May's death was probably one of the best scenes in the movie, no doubt. And then we also get to have the iconic villains from past Spider-Man movies like Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Electro, Sandman, and the Lizard. Characters who we saw are genuinely connected to Spider-Man. Seeing Tom Holland face off these classic villains made me enjoy this movie more than the previous two. Also, just wanted to say that the Spider-Man vs. Doctor Strange scene was really amazing. Like, I wasn't expecting much from it, but it was really cool being able to see Spider-Man fight these characters that we don't usually see him fight in the movies. And it was kind of funny that Spider-Man was actually able to overpower Doctor Strange inside the mirror dimension, where Doctor Strange literally has the advantage. I guess plot armor saves Spider-Man from the Sorcerer Supreme. Well, ex-Sorcerer Supreme anyway now. And so moving on to the best aspects of the movie, the character development they gave to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It was really satisfying for a Spider-Man fan. The tragedy, Peter Parker losing his Aunt May, all because he was trying to help these villains from other universes, facing the consequences of his actions, helping others but failing to help those that are close to him, is very Spider-Man-like. I definitely feel like, oh yes, this is how a Spider-Man movie should be. One of the things that the previous films were lacking was the feel of Spider-Man's great responsibility, because Tom Holland's Peter Parker was shown to be more focused on becoming this great hero worthy enough to fight alongside the Avengers, where in the original Spider-Man storylines, Spider-Man was actually more of a solo player than a team player.
I don't team with anyone.
Yeah, he did become a part of the new Avengers in the comics, but before he did, he had always been by himself. Even now actually, he prefers to work alone rather than be a team. Spider-Man's real motivation for doing what he does is the lesson he learned from Uncle Ben's death. Not acting when he could have done something led to a burglar to escape, and eventually leading to Uncle Ben getting killed. Peter's actions made him realize that it was his responsibility to do something if he could do so. That is, to prevent people from experiencing the same loss that he did. But then maybe you're thinking he did lose Iron Man in Avengers Endgame, and although yeah, that was tragic and sad, I still feel for Iron Man, but Iron Man died because of his own actions. He was trying to bring back the people that they've lost, including Spider-Man, but that wasn't because Spider-Man wasn't able to save Iron Man. It was different to how Spider-Man lost Gwen Stacy or how he lost Uncle Ben. So I don't think that really counts as a Spider-Man consequences, you know? And yeah, I know that in the end of Homecoming he did learn how to stay close to the ground and just be your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. However, when I watched this movie, I just didn't feel it very much. Like, it didn't hit me that he was doing this because he needed to. It felt like he was just so eager to become an Avenger the whole movie, and that his actions made him realize to become a hero of his own, which is good, but it's not because he has the responsibility given to him. It didn't feel like that. Like, even in Far From Home, even though I love this movie, Peter Parker in that film was trying so hard to enjoy a vacation with his friends. He clearly didn't want to do Spider-Man stuff in that movie. If it wasn't for Nick Fury being there and Mysterio tricking him, he wouldn't have gone to suit up. I know that the movie happened right after Endgame, where there was just so much tragic that happened, and although I do feel that Peter needed a break from that, but that just didn't feel right for me. It didn't feel like that's something Spider-Man would do, because the Spider-Man that I know nearly doesn't take a break. I mean, that might sound harsh, but that's the Spider-Man that I'm most used to see.
Being Spider-Man has given me a lot and taken a lot away, but one thing never changes. My responsibility to use my powers for others before myself, no matter what the cost. There are innocent people at Omnitech and they need our help right now. I won't let them down.
That's why I love Spider-Man, because he always fights no matter what. This was shown in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, because we see Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man trying so hard to balance his life as Peter Parker while also doing his responsibility as a superhero. In that movie, no matter what, Peter had always prioritized helping the citizens of New York, leading him to sacrifice his time with his friends. He couldn't attend Mary Jane's play, he got fired for delivering pizza time so late, He even forgot his own birthday.
What's the occasion?
Really, Peter? It's your birthday.
And it was because of all that stress that led Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man to lose his powers.
Existential crisis stuff.
Unlike in Far From Home, Peter had a choice. Yeah, he did go through a lot, but I think Iron Man's death should have motivated him to be better than, trying so hard to ignore his responsibilities. So, when Aunt May died trying to save Peter, giving him the iconic words, "With great power there must also come great responsibility," it really made me happy because that was what we needed for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Because now not only did he learn what being a superhero means for himself, he is now more of the Spider-Man that we all know and love. The Spider-Man that goes through tragic loss but still fights for the greater good. Because he knows that that's what Uncle Ben and his Aunt May would have wanted. And he just can't let them down.
Sometimes, to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most. Even our dreams.
I've always thought that Tobey and Andrew suffered more than Tom Holland did because their stories are just a little more serious than the previous two movies from Tom Holland. But now, Sony and Marvel showed us that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is the one who suffered the most out of all of them. Not only by losing his Aunt May, but by also losing everyone in the world who knows him. Right now, Tom Holland's Peter Parker is the loneliest Spider-Man in the multiverse of MCU. And yet he still pushed forward into becoming a better Spider-Man than he was yesterday. So this trilogy, Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home, was basically this version of Peter Parker's origin story, of how he became Spider-Boy to Spider-Man. So, all this time we were actually watching a 3-movie origin story. Wow. What a build-up, man. Now he feels complete, like all the missing pieces were scattered during the first 2 movies, and now they've all been brought together and had finally formed the superhero that we all deserve. Man, I bet Tony Stark is so proud in heaven. I haven't even talked about Tobey and Andrew's return, and I'm already fanboying over this movie so much. So yeah, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's return. It was amazing. It was so refreshing seeing them again. Like, who knew that after a few years we could see all 3 Spider-Man fighting alongside in one epic movie. Back then, we were all convinced that every time Spider-Man had been rebooted, from Tobey Maguire to Andrew Garfield to Tom Holland, that will be it. Tobey was done, Andrew was done, and then so seeing them again wear the costume, talking about themselves as the characters we've known them to see since we were kids, it's just so... Man, it just puts a smile on our face. We're glad to see that they're still doing fine and that they still exist. Their Spider-Man still exists in the multiverse. That even though their movies had ended years ago, we learned that their stories are still continuing and that they're still Spider-Man in their own universes. Like, oh man, I don't even know how to describe it. Marvel and Sony just made the impossible happen, and this just has to be one of the most memorable experiences that we'll get in superhero history. Next to Avengers Endgame, of course, that was a massive crossover. It is just truly a great time to be a Spider-Man fan, and I am so glad that I existed in this generation where we can see both the old and new and how they are evolving as years go by. And now, because of all these variants and multiple universes that Marvel has created for their movies, canonizing the previous movies into this one big multiverse, I have now come to appreciate all 3 versions of Spider-Man as equals. Like, unlike before, where we look at Tobey Maguire, we look at Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland debating which one is the most accurate Spider-Man, where in reality, they're all variants. They're all coexisting in one multiverse. And so now, I have come to the conclusion that MCU Spider-Man wasn't a bad adaptation, but actually a good reimagined version of the character. He wasn't meant to be a complete adaptation of Spider-Man competing with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. He was meant to be another version of Spider-Man out there that shares similar experiences with other Peter Parkers. And now we can all enjoy every version the same way. That is just amazing. Thanks to this movie, I now like Tom Holland's Spider-Man a lot more than I previously did. And just like everybody else, I am excited to see how our new classic Spider-Man will be portrayed in the next upcoming Spider-Man films. This is definitely the Spider-Man that we all deserve. Thank you so much, Sony and Marvel, for making all this possible.
Excelsior!